Now, who actually likes scary movies? What type of person does it take to enjoy a good scream? You know? Well, I have to say that I'm in that camp. I like scary movies. Matter of fact, this evening, before I started recording the ApoloCast for this week, I took a group of young people from our church to a haunted trail and had a good time. But it's kind of strange that, I mean, as I went and I took these kids there, I was trying to think of the last time that I personally have been. And gosh, I've got a 15-year-old son, and I believe he was 7 or 8 years old. First time I took him to a haunted trail, and I think it's the last time I've been myself. And I mean, let's say I grew up on scary movies. My mom raised me on vampires and werewolves and the guys with the masks and whatnot. So, I mean, I personally enjoy a good scary movie, but I do draw the line. And this comes down to what we're going to be talking about in regards to the worldview and the message that is presented in your common scary stories. I don't think the Christian has any place or any justification in enjoying certain horror movies that do nothing more than to simply glorify violence or to have purposeless evil, or where there is no protagonist with a moral compass that we could actually rally around and kind of cheer for survival or what have you. A good example would be like the Saw movies. You have a bad guy who's torturing people, and he doesn't really never gets caught. He outwits the good guys all the time, and so at the end of the day, we're waiting to see how the bad guy's going to get away, and there's nothing positive to pull from these movies. It's just a gore fest, and it's a celebration of evil. But not all horror movies are a mere glorification of or presentation of pure evil without a positive element. And so I want to talk about is the theology behind horror films, and how, in fact, by the time we're done, I will demonstrate to you guys that horror movies or the horror genre would not exist apart from a biblical worldview. So, now that I've kind of got your attention, I want to talk about horror movies in general and the common themes or the common elements that can be found in just about every scary story that you can think of. Now, of course, you've got your exceptions. I understand that. But in general, what are some of the things that you have to have in a scary movie? Some of the common themes. Number one, fear, right? Fear of certain things. And we'll be talking about the things that people are afraid of in a horror movie. Now, a lot of times folks will be like, the Bible says that we shouldn't fear man, we should only fear the Lord. Well, that doesn't necessarily equate to the conclusion that you can't enjoy a scary movie or be entertained by being made uncomfortable, so to speak. And that's really what a horror movie's primary goal is to do, is to make your audience entertained while being uncomfortable or while being unsettled or while being uneasy. But fear in and of itself as a whole is not always necessarily a bad thing. In fact, God instills fear mechanisms into human beings to promote their survival, such as fear of falling, fear of loud noises, those things are a part of human nature, and they're given to us by our Creator post-fall in order to keep us alert and aware of potential harm. But horror movies always have to have the element of fear, and the certain things that the horror movie genre seeks to make us afraid of, or seeks to rise up in us, is first of all potential death, right? Just about every horror movie possible gives you the sense of imminent potential death. Somebody's going to die. Somebody's going to get killed. So, not only death, but pain associated with death, and not only death as its ultimate end, but death and what is going to come after death. The second element that is prevalent in horror movies is the presence of evil. And what is evil but the opposite of good, right? And evil as something that is threatening, something that is harmful. And horror movies seek to try to amplify that as great as possible, not just evil, but ultimate evil or pure evil. So horror movies present us with the potential for death, the fear of death, and then an evil entity or evil presence that causes us to be afraid. And thirdly, many horror movies also present a supernatural element. So you've got looming death, right? Harm, the presence of evil, and oftentimes the supernatural. And you put all these things together, these are the most common themes or elements that you find in scary movies. Bad guys with a bent on violence. You have the possibility and potential for people to die, and you have the supernatural element, whether it be witches or ghosts or demons or spirits or what have you. All of these things put together, or in whatever form combination that you could think of, usually find their ways into scary movies, and these usually end up being some of the most prominent themes found in scary movies. But ultimately, all of these things in a secular, humanist, unbelieving, atheistic worldview make absolutely no sense, and therefore there should really be no reason for a true unbeliever to even be entertained by horror movies. And why do I say that? Well, think about it. Number one, death. If there is no God, if there is no afterlife, if there is no judgment, and if humanity really has no ultimate intrinsic value, we're just a cosmic accident that did not come to existence by the willful intent and purpose of a God who created us in His image for a purpose or for meaning or for anything like that, if we're really just cosmic broccoli, then what does death matter? I mean, it's not a scary movie when we have the exterminator come and kill the bugs around our house, and if we're of no more ultimate worth than any other product of evolution, then death is irrelevant. And death, even in horror entertainment, is irrelevant because it's not really scary. It just is what it is. Secondly, the presence of pure evil. One of my favorite quotes from one of my favorite vampire flicks was said by George Clooney in From Dusk Till Dawn. From Dusk Till Dawn, it was a movie about these two bank robbers who hijacked and kidnapped a family in a camper, in an RV, and made them drive to Mexico to escape from the U.S. Marshals and to meet up with their partners to get a large sum of money. And they basically went to Mexico, and then they met at a late night bar where all the patrons of the bar ended up being vampires, and the two bank robber brothers, along with the family that they kidnapped, fought together to save their lives from the horde of vampires. And so there was a crisis of faith in the movie, and I don't want to spoil it for anybody. It's an older movie, but you can go in and check it out. But there was a crisis of faith, and George Clooney's character looked at the father of the family, who at one time was a pastor but had lost his faith, and he said, "We need a holy man right now. We need a godly man right now." And basically what he said was, if there is a hell and there's a devil and these things are from it, then there's got to be a heaven. There just got to be. And I know it's kind of a passing moment in the movie, but I always thought it was quite profound, is that the reality of what he said was that if there is evil, and what we are witnessing is a portrayal of evil in these horror movies, the only way that we can actually, rationally, consistently, logically profess that what is portrayed in these movies is actual evil is only in the conversation in which we acknowledge that there is actually good. And not subjective goodness, but objective goodness. And the only objective goodness that can make any sense is God, who is the standard of goodness, and who, by contrast and comparison, we can call anything else evil. So in order for evil to actually be anything worth discussing, we have to acknowledge the existence of God, because without the existence of God, there is no objective good and therefore no objective evil. So to the horror genre, we say you're welcome, because the meaningfulness and purposefulness of death and the existence of evil can only make sense in a biblical worldview. And lastly, I think it goes without saying, is the supernatural element. The supernatural element only exists in a biblical worldview, because it is only the Christian worldview that acknowledges and accepts the reality of the supernatural. Any other worldview is based out of naturalistic, materialistic thinking that eliminates the possibility for the supernatural, because it seeks to explain everything through logic, reason, and rationality, and that there is nothing that can violate the laws of nature. But within the Christian worldview, we acknowledge the existence of the supernatural, because we believe in a God that stands outside of and can function apart from the nature in which he created. So, long story short, and to wrap it all up, the biblical worldview, the Christian worldview, is the only worldview that can make sense of and appreciate and allow itself to be entertained by the horror genre. Now, does that mean that it's good for us, or it's necessary for us, or that we can't have a conversation about whether or not Christians should partake in or participate in the enjoyment of horror movies? That really is a discussion that we can have, and everyone can have their own opinion about it. We shouldn't disfellowship from those with whom we disagree, but the disagreements can be had. But the point I want to make is, when you engage in, or when you participate in the viewing or the watching or the consumption of the horror genre, just remember that it's only the Christian worldview, only the biblical worldview that can make sense of, or that allows horror movies to make sense in and of themselves. And so, with that, I hope you guys have a wonderful holiday season. I'll see you guys next week with a new episode of the ApoloCast.